Great, we're on time, so we can get started. I'm Eva Sarafianou. I'm excited to be here, and for the next 15 to 20 minutes, we will be talking about managing dependencies in managing vulnerabilities in open source dependencies. A few things about myself: I lead the product security team at Mattermost. Mattermost, if you don't know, it's a communication platform for mission-critical infrastructure. I was previously at Auth0, got acquired by Okta, was a principal product security there, and I live in Athens, Greece, with my partner and our dog. That's Trufa. What we'll go over today is, first of all, why we even talk about this, why third-party dependencies matter and why their vulnerabilities matter. We'll discuss how to evaluate SCA tools, how to roll them out, and how to triage the findings. So why do we care? The simple question is that our software is comprised by both in-house code and third-party code. For large enterprises, this could be a half and half in terms of percentages, but if you go in smaller projects, then third-party dependencies have even a higher percentage than what we're seeing here. And what this means is that the more dependencies you add, the more attack surface you add. And there's a valid question here. Yes, we would add more attack surface if we were adding more in-house code. And that's true, but there's one big difference between in-house code and third-party dependencies. You don't have control over it. For your in-house code, you can control your processes, your security reviews, anything. You cannot control that for your dependencies. So this is where there is an even greater attack surface because you cannot control what it is that you're importing and what processes they followed. A great example that was mentioned in the previous talk is Log4j 2021, a critical vulnerability in this logging library in Java had severe consequences in softwares using it. So with that, I hope we're in agreement that third-party dependencies matter, their vulnerabilities matter. What are we going to do about it? Here it says first step, evaluating tools. SCA tools is software composition analysis. Before we go on evaluation is why do we need them? Is because managing both direct and transitive dependencies and their vulnerabilities, you really need a tool to do that for you. It's very manual otherwise. And now the question is, how do we evaluate those tools out there? There are many commercial or open source ones. I'm not going to suggest any of them. It's more having a formula around evaluation. The first thing is define and document your own set of requirements. What we usually do is we go out there, we search for the most popular tools, and then we try to see which fits best for us. I think we need to do the exact opposite. First, define what are our requirements, because otherwise we may get biased. There is a QR code there. It will be in the next two slides as well. It's a spreadsheet with a template that you could use for your own evaluation. And in the next two slides, we will also discuss the contents of that QR code. So once you have defined and documented your requirements, it's good to define a level of need. You don't really need everything. You have some must-haves that will really be strong during your evaluation, but then you'll have some nice to have ones. And only once you're very clear about what you're looking for, then you can start searching for tools. Usually, if you go and check their documentation, you will be able to find most of the answers to your requirements questions. So you can go through their docs, find if they're pretty well compared to your requirements, and then I'd say pick max 3, and that's for timing and resource reasons, tools for further evaluation. What I mean by further evaluation is really try out the tool and not just try out the integrations, the settings, test the findings, input code and software that you know has vulnerable dependencies and make sure that those get found. You really need a tool that is both accurate in the findings but also complete. So anything that needs to be reported is reported. And this is not always very easy for SCA tools to do, again, depending on your languages. So this is a formula on evaluation. If we go back to the requirements, and I'm not sure how readable this is, but the QR code is there. You can have different levels of requirements. You want both transitive and direct ones. You want SBOM generation. You want reporting capabilities. Then you'll probably have a section around languages and package managers. And these are usually the requirements that will be a must-have because you need to cover or all the languages and the package managers that you have in-house. There are different ones you can consider, like policy management, whether you want that tool to warn you, to break the build, and so on. There are different integrations that can make your life easier, or similar to the previous talk, you could have a need for reachability analysis. Again, for reachability, it's quite difficult to always get this right. So I would say, again, during your evaluation trial, make sure that reachability works as expected. So with that, you go through your evaluation, you pick a tool, and now it's the time to roll this out. I would say there are two big options on how to do this. The first one is roll out at once. And what I mean by that is you integrate your tool into all your repositories, and then you start triaging the findings. There is one big problem with that. The moment you will integrate the tool with all the repositories, you'll get such a high number of findings, it does feel chaotic, and I've been there. It's difficult once you've integrated everything into your tool to find a way to prioritize, to get agreement from engineering teams and security teams to work collaboratively on that. This is why I'm suggesting a phased rollout. And in this case, I'd say make a list of your most important repos. I'm having a max 5 here again for time reasons because we need that rollout to complete at some point. Make a list of those most important repos, stack rank them, and then pick a time 0. And on that time 0, integrate your first repository. Also define a period of time till your next repository to be added. It's a 15-day here, but it can be whatever works best for your organization. And during that period of time, you make sure that you mitigate all critical and high findings. 15 days or X amount of days pass, and then you integrate your second repo. And similarly, another interval passes, you mitigate your high and critical ones for the second repo, and then you introduce your third repo into your SCA tool, and so on. There is one important thing to consider when integrating a repository to a tool. Make sure that the moment you integrate the repository, you also make sure that any new code introduced, any new PRs that introduce a dependency, they get scanned. Because what we want, the moment we roll out a tool, is that there are no new dependencies added with vulnerabilities. Or your security team may want to have an exception policy, that's another story. But it would need to be a deliberate decision. So no new dependencies with vulnerabilities. And then this is when we can start addressing historical findings. And by historical findings, I mean those that were reported the time you added the repository to your SCA tool. During the rollout, if it's a phase 1, we would have already mitigated the high and critical ones, and then we can start addressing our medium and low ones. And there is a valid question to be asked here. If I start tackling our medium and low ones, when am I going to add more repos? Because I just added my 5 ones. This is a balance that you can decide. You can either have another phase rollout of 10 more, or you can start triaging your medium ones. It depends on how many repositories you want to integrate, what's the importance of them for your software. Now that we have this rollout, we're ready to start triaging findings. And when there is a new vulnerability it's usually from 2 different categories. The first one is you have already integrated your repository into an SCA tool, and there's a new vulnerability discovered. So this gets, you get alerted by your SCA tool. Or you just added your repository into the SCA tool, and you get a list of reports. One of them is one vulnerability. My suggestion is that there is a time-boxed investigation that aims to answer 2 questions. The one is very easy, which is it a test dependency? Maybe you don't want to focus on that first. The second one is something that the previous talk also touched on, which is exploitability and reachability. So is this vulnerable dependency really reachable from my code? In other words, is this exploitable? Now, the second question can take significant time to answer. So this is why it's a time-boxed investigation. The time defined differs per organization and resources. And another thing to consider is there needs to be a balance between the time you need to spend for this investigation and the time needed to actually just go ahead and update the dependency. if updating the dependency is easy enough and you have a good test coverage to feel that this is a safe option, it's faster, just go for that and skip the investigation. And another thing that is important, especially for less severity findings, for your low ones, for example, is having a regular maintenance schedule. You may agree with the engineering org that every so often we will have a regular schedule of updating dependencies. So all those low ones that never get prioritized, it's their chance to get updated. Some key takeaways. Choose your tool wisely. It can help you a lot, or the exact opposite. Spend time on the evaluation. I tend to spend more than a month or two evaluating tools because you stick with that and it's very difficult to change tools. It's expensive. The second one is when you roll out such a tool, have a clear plan on how you will mitigate this amount of findings that you will get. Otherwise, they will be sitting there just alerting you every week, and you'll be just ignoring the email. And the third one is, this is not an easy task. And this is why I say this is an org-wide effort. It's not just the security team that will do the investigation. It's not just the engineering teams that need to go and update those dependencies. It's an org-wide effort. This is why when you decide to roll out a tool, and you do that not just for compliance where, yes, we have an SCA tool, but you really want to work on the findings, get an agreement from your leadership that now that we roll out the tool, we will need could be a month, 2 or more, where we will focus on that, clear our historical findings, and then be in a clear situation to tackle any new finding that comes either from newly discovered vulnerabilities or from a PR adding a new dependency with vulnerability. This is all I had to say. I think I talked a bit too fast, so we have time for questions.
You said that we should rank or repos. So is it based on business criticality or I don't know, exploitability, or what kind of factors should we consider in this?
I think it's business product ranking, like how much, if you ship a software, this usually comprises of 1, 2, 3, a handful repositories. This is what your customers are using. This is what your end users are using. This is what I call the most important repos. Any other question? Great, thank you very much.